Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that about 2.7 billion boxes of cereal are sold every year? Learn how Americans today eat about 10 to 14 pounds of cereal per year instead of eating large, meat-heavy breakfasts that were eaten in the 1800s. Discover that in 1932, Rice Krispies was named the first talking cereal because of the sound it made when mixed in a bowl of milk. Snap, crackle, and pop.
I want you to try and visualize a number for me, because my brain is actually having a hard time scaling this up.
Okay, I'm ready.
Picture a standard box of cereal, just your average, cardboard rectangle.
Right.
Now line them up end to end. Keep going until you've wrapped that line around the entire circumference of the Earth.
Okay, so one loop around the planet.
Yeah, now do it 12 more times.
Yeah.
That is the scale we are dealing with. We are talking about 2.7 billion boxes sold every single year.
It's a supply chain nightmare, honestly.
It really is. That's enough to circle the globe 13 times.
When you look at the logistics of moving that much cardboard and puffed grain, it's staggering.
And on an individual level, that averages out to something like 10 to 14 pounds of cereal for every single person every year.
We're practically swimming in it.
We are swimming in milk and grain. And since March 7th is National Cereal Day, I thought we should dig into this. But not just because it's popular.
Right, because the ubiquity is kind of the deceptive part. We walk down that aisle in the grocery store.
Which is usually an entire aisle, by the way.
Exactly, a massive aisle, and we just see breakfast. But if you
Yeah.
actually look at the history, you're looking at a battlefield.
That is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are going to trace how this industry actually happened.
Because it wasn't just, someone woke up and invented flakes.
Right. It's a story about the Civil War, digestive health radicalism, industrialization, and eventually this massive shift toward sugar and cartoons.
It really is the story of how a medical treatment became a Saturday morning ritual.
A medical treatment is the perfect place to start, because I think we have this pastoral idea of the past, right? Where everyone on the farm ate fresh oatmeal and berries.
Oh, definitely not.
But the reality of the 19th century American breakfast was, well, heavy.
Heavy is an understatement. If you look at the average diet in the mid-1800s, it was essentially a survival diet adapted for a very different lifestyle.
Right.
It was basically British tradition meeting American abundance. You're talking about leftovers from dinner, sure, but also bacon, sausage, beef steaks, fried chicken, and eggs.
At like 7 a.m.
Before 7 a.m. usually.
Oh, man.
And it was all cooked in grease. You have to remember, there's no refrigeration. Curing meat and frying it was how you kept it safe and palatable.
Just hearing that gives me the meat sweats. I literally can't imagine eating a steak and fried chicken before starting my day.
Well, neither could their stomachs.
Yeah, bad.
By the time the Civil War rolls around in the 1860s, America is collectively suffering from what historians describe as dyspepsia.
Dyspepsia.
Yeah, it was a national indigestion crisis. People were bloated, sluggish, and just in pain constantly.
So the national mood was basically, I need to lie down.
Precisely. And in the 19th century, physical health was deeply intertwined with moral standing.
Interesting.
You had this group of dietary reformers popping up who looked at this meat-heavy, grease-laden diet, and they literally saw sin. They believed that rich, spicy, meaty foods inflamed the, quote, animal passions.
The animal passions. That is a very polite way of saying they thought bacon made you too lustful.
That is exactly what they thought. They believed that to purify the soul, you had to purify the gut. A bland diet meant a pious life.
Okay, so enter Dr. James Caleb Jackson. The year is 1863.
Right.
He runs a sanitarium, which is basically a health resort for the wealthy and unwell, and he decides to invent the antidote to the sausage breakfast, the first cold cereal. He calls it granula.
Now, we need to be very clear about what granula was.
Yeah, we do.
If you were picturing the loose, crunchy oat clusters you buy at Whole Foods today, erase that image.
Yeah, the descriptions of this stuff are formidable. It wasn't food, it was construction material.
Literally.
It was bran and graham flour, mixed with water, baked into a brittle cake, crumbled up, and then baked again.
It was dense. In fact, it was so hard that it was physically impossible to chew dry. You would break your teeth.
The instructions literally said you had to soak it in milk overnight.
Just to make it edible.
You had to plan your breakfast 12 hours in advance just to make it soft enough to swallow.
And even then, it was incredibly bland. But you have to understand the desperation of the consumer at that time.
That's a good point.
If you are living with chronic, debilitating indigestion from eating pork fat every morning, a bland, soaked bran brick actually sounds like a relief. It was functional food.
It was penance in a bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
But it worked well enough that it caught the attention of the man who would basically become the Steve Jobs of the cereal world, Dr. John Kellogg.
Dr. Kellogg is such a fascinating figure. He was a brilliant surgeon, but also a relentless self-promoter and a strict Seventh-day Adventist.
Right.
He took over the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan in 1876.
And we need to set the scene for this ending. This wasn't a relaxing day spa where you get a cucumber mask and listen to pan flutes.
No, it was a medical and religious institution. It was rigorous. Kellogg's philosophy was biological living.
Biological living.
No alcohol, no tobacco, no caffeine, and absolutely no meat.
Mm-hmm.
He was obsessed with the digestive tract. He wanted to scrub the American gut clean.
So he needs a food that fits this philosophy, right?
Yeah.
He tries to make his own version of Jackson's bran brick.
He did. He combined wheat, oatmeal, and cornmeal. And in a move that I'm sure he thought was innocent, but probably wasn't, he also named it granular.
Which I assume Jackson didn't take lying down?
Not at all. Jackson sued him almost immediately.
Naturally.
So, to avoid the lawsuit, Kellogg changed one letter. Granula became granola.
But granola was still just processed baked grains. The real revolution, the thing that changed the world, was the accident.
Yes, the flake.
Right. The story goes that John Kellogg and his brother Will, who was basically the business brains running the operations, they were experimenting with wheat.
They were trying to figure out how to make this vegetarian diet more palatable for their patients. They cooked some wheat, but then they got called away. Some sources say they had to attend to a patient. Others say it was just a busy day at the sanitarium. But when they came back, the wheat had gone stale.
Now, in a modern kitchen, you'd throw that out.
Yeah.
But these guys are running a business, and they're frugal.
Exactly. They decided to force this stale, tempered wheat through the rollers anyway, expecting to get a sheet of dough.
But it didn't work.
No, because the moisture content had changed, the wheat didn't bond. It shattered into individual, large, thin flakes.
I can just imagine that moment. They're looking at these piles of flakes thinking, well, we ruined it.
But then they toasted them, and suddenly they had something revolutionary. It wasn't a rock-hard nugget, it was light. It was airy.
It crunched, but it melted in your mouth.
And crucially, you didn't have to soak it overnight. You could pour milk on it and eat it immediately.
That was the key. They invented Kellogg's Corn Flakes. Well, after switching from wheat to corn for texture, and it exploded.
It solved the two biggest problems of the era. It was easy to digest, which satisfied the health reformers, and it was instant.
And that instant factor is what brings us to the next phase. Because while Kellogg was obsessed with health, the world was changing around him. We're moving into the Industrial Revolution.
This is the context we can't ignore. In the late 1800s, Americans are leaving the farm and moving to the city.
And that changes the math of the morning.
Completely. On a farm, you wake up at 4:30 a.m. to milk cows. By 8:00 a.m., you've burned 1,000 calories and you have time for a big meal.
But in the city.
In the city, you have a factory whistle or an office clock. You don't have time to light a wood stove, wait for it to heat up, fry bacon, and bake biscuits.
Cereal becomes the ultimate hack. It's the first real convenience food.
Exactly. It was nutrition in a bowl. It allowed the workforce to fuel up in 5 minutes. That's why it took off. It wasn't just about health. It was about the acceleration of American life.
And where there is money in acceleration, there are sharks. Enter C.W. Post.
Charles William Post. He was actually a patient at the Battle Creek Sanitarium in 1893. He was there trying to cure his own stomach issues.
So he's sitting there, eating Kellogg's experimental foods, watching the operation.
And taking notes. He saw the commercial potential that the Kellogg brothers were just starting to tap into.
The audacity.
I know. He checked out, moved to a different part of Battle Creek, and started his own cereal company. By 1897, he's selling grape nuts and Post Toasties.
Grape nuts is such a weird name, by the way. No grapes, no nuts.
It was marketing. The grape referred to grape sugar glucose, which formed during baking, and the nut was the nutty flavor.
Ah.
But Post was a marketing genius. He realized you didn't just sell the food, you sold the cure. He claimed grape nuts could cure appendicitis, malaria, and loose teeth.
He claimed it cured malaria. That is bold.
It was the era of patent medicine. You could say whatever you wanted. But it established cereal as a product that you needed for your well-being.
So we have the health era and we have the convenience era. But looking at the cereal aisle today, It doesn't look like health food. It looks like a carnival.
Very true.
When did we make the turn from bran brick to sugar bomb?
That shift really accelerates after World War II. You have the baby boom, and suddenly the target demographic shifts from dyspeptic adults to hungry children.
And at the same time, television arrives.
Right. And with TV comes the ability to sell directly to those kids.
And you see the product change to match the medium. Bland flakes are hard to sell to a 6-year-old. But sugar-coated flakes with a cartoon character, that's a gold mine.
Let's talk about those mascots. Because they weren't just random drawings, they were engineered. Take Tony the Tiger.
Yeah, Frosted Flakes debuts in 1952.
Now think about the product. It's just cornflakes coated in sugar. To a parent in the 50s, that might seem excessive.
Sure.
But if you have a friendly, athletic tiger saying they're great, it softens the image. It associates the sugar with energy and sports.
It's the breakfast of champions logic, but for kids. Speaking of which, Wheaties did that first, right?
Yes. 1933 for the slogan, and they put Lou Gehrig on the box in 1934.
And then there's the Trix Rabbit. That is a saga of psychological warfare. It really is. Trix launched, and the rabbit, who actually started as a hand puppet on early TV shows like Rocky and Bullwinkle.
The puppet?
Yeah, on Captain Kangaroo too.
Yeah.
Anyway, the rabbit became the embodiment of desire. The slogan, Silly Rabbit, Tricks are for kids, created this exclusive club.
I see.
If you were a kid, you were in on it. The rabbit was excluded. It made the cereal feel like forbidden fruit that you were allowed to have.
And then you have the heavy hitters of lore, Cap'n Crunch.
1963. And this is where the world building gets intense. They didn't just draw a captain. They gave him a full name.
Horatio Magellan Crunch?
Exactly. They gave him a birthplace. Crunch Island in the Sea of Milk.
It sounds ridiculous, but that backstory matters. It turns breakfast into a narrative. You aren't eating corn squares. You're joining Horatio on an adventure.
Exactly. It creates an emotional bond with the brand. And then you have Fruit Loops in 1962. This is my absolute favorite example of how marketing overrides reality.
So Fruit Loops originally had 3 colors, red, orange, and yellow. They added the blue, purple, and green later in the 90s.
Right.
And if you ask anyone, ask yourself, you probably think the red one tastes like cherry or strawberry, and the yellow tastes like lemon.
I would bet money on it. I can definitely taste the difference.
You can't, because they are all the exact same flavor.
Wait, really?
The flavoring formula is identical for every single loop.
Seriously. I feel like I'm being gaslit by a toucan.
It's the multisensory perception effect. Your brain sees red and expects red fruit, so it fills in the gap. It is a triumph of marketing over sensory input. We are eating the idea of fruit, not the fruit itself.
That is genuinely wild.
Yeah.
It shows how far we drifted from Dr. Kellogg's biological living. He wanted science. We ended up with psychological tricks.
And yet cereal became so dominant that it transcended the kitchen table entirely. It became a symbol of American stability. I mean, we literally send it to the moon.
The Apollo 11 mission. This part blows my mind. Why bother?
It's 1969. NASA is trying to figure out how to feed astronauts. They have high-tech nutrient pastes available, but they chose to bring cereal to, quote-unquote, boost brain power.
But really, it was about morale.
Because it was comforting. It was a taste of home.
But the mechanics of that seem impossible. You can't pour milk in zero gravity. It would just be a floating sphere of dairy.
Right, and crumbs are a disaster in space. They can get into the electronics, so they couldn't use regular flakes.
So what do?
They basically mixed the cereal with fruit and pressed it into these high-density cubes.
Cereal cubes.
Cereal cubes. The astronauts had to eat them dry.
That sounds suspiciously like the return of the granula brick.
It does, doesn't it? We came full circle. But it shows that even when we leave the planet, we can't leave the concept of cereal behind.
So where does that leave us today? We have the legacy of the health reformers and the legacy of the sugar wars.
We have a hybrid. If you look at the best-selling ready-to-eat cereal in the U.S. for the last few years, it's Honey Nut Cheerios.
Which feels like a compromise.
It is perfectly designed. It has the health halo of the original Cheerios Oats, heart health, lower cholesterol.
They were called Cheeriots originally, right?
Exactly, until 1944. But Honey Nut Cheerios takes that health halo and glazes it in sugar and honey. It sits right in the middle of the spectrum.
It appeals to the adult who wants to be healthy and the inner child who wants the sugar.
It's the peace treaty in the breakfast wars. It generated nearly $500 million in sales in 2019 alone, so clearly it's working.
So when we look back at this 150-year history, what's the big takeaway for you? We went from a medical intervention to a pop culture phenomenon.
I think the takeaway is really about adaptation. Cereal survived because it kept shapeshifting. When we needed digestion, it was bran.
When we needed speed, it was flakes.
And when we wanted entertainment, it was colorful loops. It mirrors whatever America is obsessed with at the moment.
It's a mirror in a bowl. But I have to ask, if Dr. Kellogg or Dr. Jackson could walk down the cereal aisle today, maybe past the Count Chocula and the Fruit Loops, what would they think?
Honestly, I think they would be horrified. Remember, these men viewed sugar as a toxin and flavor as a sin.
That's true.
To them, a modern bowl of cereal isn't breakfast. It's a moral failing. They wouldn't recognize it as their invention. They'd probably try to admit us all to the sanitarium to detox.
That is a terrifying thought.
Okay.
I'm going to go eat a bowl of bran flakes and reflect on my choices. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.